Okay, I think we'll get started. We've got quite a few people that have arrived, so thank you. Thank you, everyone. Welcome for everyone to joining this webinar. Just before we get started, just wanted to highlight that the session is being recorded, but it's only the presentations and the speaker contributions that will appear in any public sharing of the recording. And that the single Q&A session will follow after the presentation, although the question and answers box should be available now. So please, during the presentations, if you've got any questions, please start listing them there so that that we can pick them up later on. Okay, so hello, and thank you for joining, and welcome to the third of our three-part webinar series focused on our multidisciplinary research project, Transforming Houses and Homes for Future Generations. This follows on, just for context for others that maybe can join other webinars, follows on from the first two, sorry, that we're delivering transformation of demonstration homes and putting people at the heart of housing transformation. This one, as we'll explain in a little bit, moves on to the design catalogue that we're developing as part of that. My name is Steve. I'm the Deputy Head for Education and Student Experience and a Design Research Architect at the Welsh School of Architecture, Cardiff University, and I'm one of the co-authors on the project, leading particularly in the area of design research. And I also have the pleasure of chairing this webinar today. Also on camera, you'll see we have all on one camera, you'll notice today. We also have Laura, Joel and Chenfei, who will be speaking and delivering this webinar primarily. Just got a handful of slides that I'll go through just to introduce the project. So first, we are funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council through the Green Transition Ecosystems Award as a consortium of 4 universities, 6 industry and community partners, with an overall consortium team of approximately 50 researchers, stakeholders and experts. And as such, later on, when it gets to the questions, we may find that some questions are more specialist to others who maybe aren't on this webinar today, but we'll deal with that as that comes up. Our primary aim is simple, to transform existing 1920s to 1940s council-built housing for future generations with and for local communities to improve the quality, health and living experience for residents, reduce residential operational energy bills, and deliver holistic beyond net zero solutions whilst increasing the use of bio-based materials. And our objectives are primarily focused around developing 3 transformational processes and solutions: improving the architectural design and space standards, enhancing the building fabric through bio-based and non-extracted products and materials, and integrating low carbon technologies to lower energy demand. A little bit about the project. There are currently 1.4 million homes that were built as part of social housing development from 1920 to 1940 across the UK. These homes are therefore around 100 years old, and although very well built, were developed for a different era and now require transformation to make them fit for the next 100 years, addressing the need for low carbon housing that is adapted to future climates, healthy, and has low running costs. All our work is underpinned by a committed approach to co-design and design research methods, embedding people at the heart of the design process, incorporating diverse perspectives to develop designs through iterative processes, where outputs and decisions from each of our engagement processes inform further design research. By doing this, we aim to create designs that are not only technically and environmentally appropriate, but also socially and economically relevant. A significant part of our project is focused on and informed by the live transformation of 6 demonstration homes now in Bristol and Swansea, co-designed with residents and wider stakeholders to understand, explore and apply research through design. And that was the focus of the first webinar. From this, we are aiming to develop knowledge and understanding that can both create and inform positive impacts by improving the quality and lifetime of existing housing stock, enabling improvements in internal space and layouts, increase the use of bio-based materials within housing transformation, reducing energy bills and fuel poverty, reducing carbon emissions, and providing evidence for the benefits of collaboration and engagement between residents and stakeholders. It's across all of these areas that we'll be focusing on today, in the holistic design of existing housing and homes, considering design and spatial qualities, using bio-based and non-extracted materials to reduce operational and embodied energy. So, to introduce today's webinar, we are focusing on developing a Transforming Homes Design Catalogue to inspire future housing transformations. We'll have one talk that'll be around half an hour, delivered collaboratively by Laura, Chenfei and Joel, who are research associates within the Transforming Homes project at Cardiff University. I will leave them to introduce the specifics of this talk in the next slide. So without further ado, I'll just hand over to Laura, Chenfei and Joel.
Great, thank you very much, Steve. So just to give a very quick idea of what we'll cover in this session. So we're going to begin by talking about the process that we've been working through to develop the design catalogue and how we've been bringing in the expertise of residents and housing professionals, as well as the broad interdisciplinary Transforming Homes team. And then we'll have a bit of an overview about what the catalogue will contain, and then some time for a question and answer at the end. So what is the design catalogue? It's a document to inspire the transformation of 1920 to 1940 council-built homes. That's to demonstrate the Transforming Homes approach to adapting existing homes of one specific archetype, so in this case interwar social housing, to the needs of current and future generations. It's bringing together interdisciplinary research from across the project and what we've learned from co-design processes into a practical and accessible industry-facing piece of guidance. So what this will include in practice is some context about the housing typology that we're working with, and then information about the design research processes that underpin the development, which Joel will talk about a bit more in a second. And then the brief that's emerged through our work with residents and housing professionals. And then there's a whole section of design proposals that have been developed in response to this research, providing guidance on how to transform these homes. So whilst this is an industry-facing document, it's designed to be simple and accessible. It's also going to reference all the other outputs from across the project to provide further detail and evidence of everything that's in there.
So all elements of the catalogue are developed through iterative design research processes where basically inputs feed into inputs from co-design, from the design activities that we do here in the studio and from the broader consortium feed in throughout the process of developing it. And you can see here on the left a range of the inputs that are feeding into that. So important inputs from the demonstration homes in Bristol and Swansea, and also from a broad programme of nationwide engagement across England and Wales. And down the right-hand side, you can see that the catalogue in a red rectangle forms one key output of this part of the project. And it also sits alongside other key outputs, which include 6 completed demonstration homes, a range of resources for engaging housing professionals and residents, and a large number of more traditional academic outputs. The catalogue will sit in a history and a tradition of housing design manuals. All of those provided in some way widely applicable guidance on the design and construction of particular kinds of homes. So on the left, you can see a 19th century Georgian pattern book. So those kind of pattern books shaped the development of lots of our towns and cities in England and Wales throughout the 19th century. In the middle here, you can see the manual on the preparation of state-aided housing schemes, published in 1919, and also called the Tudor Walters Report, which is the kind of central design manual that shaped the design and delivery of all the homes that we're working with. And then on the right, you can see a range of pattern books and manuals from the 21st century when we're facing twin housing and climate crises. So there are manuals that provide guidance on retrofitting existing housing stock and on building low carbon new housing. There isn't a manual of this kind at the moment that deals with 1920 to 1940 council built homes as a whole. So that's obviously one thing that makes this different from other similar or comparable documents, and there's a number of other key aspects that make it different. So firstly, as I've touched on, it demonstrates an approach to transforming a standardized housing typology, a scalable and transferable set of solutions across 1.4 million homes, but understanding that the interpretation of context is vital in that. So it's not a kind of one size fits all set of retrofit measures. It's really important that we're thinking about the solutions it contains, considering homes as spaces and places to live. So thinking about livability and well-being as well as technical performance, and moving beyond the idea of retrofit as a kind of top-down imposed set of technical exercises. We're also focusing on bio-based and non-extractive materials. So these obviously have lower environmental impacts, and they're often also better for both buildings and people. So encouraging the increased uptake of those is a really important aspect of the work that we're doing. And finally, the proposals in the catalogue will be co-designed. So as Steve has touched on, shaped by input from residents, housing industry professionals, and academic specialists.
Okay, great. So as we've mentioned, we're working specifically with one archetype of housing, which is homes built by councils between the two world wars, so roughly 1920 to 1940. These are the first social homes built at scale across England and Wales in response to housing shortages after the First World War. And it's really important to emphasise that this movement was design-led in the belief that providing people with high-quality, well-designed homes would improve their health, well-being, and also act as a catalyst for wider social change. So more than 1 million of these homes were built to a standard set of layouts and specifications issued by the government at the time, which Joel just touched on in terms of that manual. And so we know that the solutions that we're developing as part of this research have the potential to be scalable and transferable to homes of this type right across England and Wales. So the homes, when they were built, were state-of-the-art and really well suited to the lifestyle and needs of people living 100 years ago. But obviously, the way that we live now has changed enormously, and we need to consider how we make sure that these homes continue to serve the people living in them, both now and into the future. So I really like these images which show life on an estate in Birmingham shortly after the homes were built. And so you can see streets with no cars, living rooms where the fireplace was the only heat source in the house and therefore made that a real hub of domestic life. And bedrooms only used for sleeping, partly because they weren't heated, with beds as the only furniture. And so I think, yeah, as we work with residents, we can start to see how some of these original design features, which were very well suited to people in 1920, aren't quite so well suited to life as people expect it now. So our research has shown that as they stand today, these homes really closely match the government issued designs from 100 years ago. So although they look slightly different from the outside, their layouts and construction are all really similar right across England and Wales. And although many have undergone a lot of adaptations and changes since they were built, it's easy for us to recognise how the homes correspond with the original house types from the government designs. And our research has shown that there are 3 of these house types that cover a vast majority of these homes remaining in social ownership. So we're going to keep referring to those throughout as A, B, and D.
So now, just having given a bit of brief background on the homes, we're going to cover the work we've been doing to develop the design catalogue. And first, just to talk a little bit more about the information that we've been gathering to inform the designs and how we've gathered that. So this recaps a little bit on something I've already mentioned, but there are 6 demonstration homes in Swansea and Bristol, and those give us an opportunity to understand the homes as buildings and how they are lived in granular detail. And we're not going to go into those in detail here because we've covered those on a webinar a couple of weeks ago, which is available online to watch back. So beyond that, there's 25 households that we've invited to take part in day-long resident charrettes, and we've used scale models and conventional recording techniques to understand their homes and how they use them. This works in parallel with charrettes held with a broad community of housing professionals. And then at a wider scale, we visited estates across the country to understand what they are like as places to live. And we're also gathering information about the design and layout of hundreds of individual homes through a desktop survey. You can see here, this map just shows the range of engagement and information gathering activities that we've done so far, and this will continue expanding throughout the lifetime of the project. So the next phase of charrettes is planned for the autumn, where we'll start to gain feedback on the developing design catalogue from both residents and housing professionals.
Okay, so I'm not going to cover this in too much detail because we talked more about these in previous webinars, but to give a really brief overview of what these charrettes involved, they're very much based around using physical cardboard models as a key resource for gathering information and ideas from residents, both about how they use their homes, what they value, and what they would improve and how they would go about that. And not only are they a really effective design tool and a means of gathering information, they allow everyone in the room to communicate in a common language. And we've held these similar charrettes with residents and also housing industry professionals and with our interdisciplinary consortium, and have found this a really effective way to work. So as I mentioned, our research has shown that there are 3 most common interwar social house types, the A, B, and D that I mentioned. And those are the template for the models that we've used in all of those charrettes. They're also the focus of the catalogue design work and the toolkit of resources for the co-design work. So we're continuing to develop the process of these charrettes as well as the resources, both as a way of co-designing the catalogue and a standalone set of resources to be used beyond the project. So as an example, we were in Nottingham yesterday at the TPAS National Tenant Conference, testing a more developed version of these charrettes with involved residents from all over the UK. And yeah, as Joel mentioned, we're also carrying out wider research into these homes using data from online estate agencies, which is allowing us to build a more detailed picture of what the homes are like now all across the UK. And something really interesting about that is seeing how people who have bought these homes have adapted them over time. Now, just back to Joel to talk about how all of this information we've been gathering has fed into the brief for the design catalogue.
So yeah, design proposals need a brief, and we've gathered a huge amount of information as we've covered to feed into that. And that brief, we're going to explain it now in three broad aspects. So first, the kind of overarching brief for the Transforming Homes project, which obviously feeds into to the catalogue as one of the key outputs of that, focusing particularly on the use of bio-based and non-extractive fabric, on looking at moving beyond conventional retrofit, particularly in addressing the spatial implications of some of the things we found out. So looking at how we can make homes larger and how we can make spaces work better for how people live now, and also incorporating a range of low carbon technologies to lower energy demand and reduce operational carbon.
Okay, so our work with residents has been really rich in terms of understanding what's valued about the homes and what's more challenging and therefore needs addressing through the designs for transformation. So while residents talked about the need for homes that were affordable to heat and free from damp and mould, larger families in particular tended to place more emphasis on spatial challenges, including small bedrooms and a lack of space for family dining, homework and storage. And kitchens and bathrooms were often seen as small and poorly lit, while living rooms were really widely valued as spacious and well lit and really central to daily life. And many residents talked about privacy and accessibility, as well as issues around them themselves adapting to using new technologies. And so all of this that we've learned from these resident engagement activities is feeding into this brief.
Similarly, we've drawn key points from the work we've done with housing professionals. I'm just going to try and summarize those, which is a kind of complicated set of things, but I'm just going to have a go. So in no particular order, having a clear idea of cost is really key in terms of both upfront costs to the housing provider and operational cost to residents. And that operational cost is obviously closely related to operational energy use. Secondly, it's important to be able to understand and manage the level of disruption to residents. So a particular consideration is obviously whether residents can remain in situ during any works to their home or whether they might need to be moved out. And then related to that whole disruption piece is the ongoing maintenance requirements, which housing providers obviously need to understand. So, you know, what are the implications of changing to a perhaps less common insulation material, or, you know, what are the implications of changing from a PVC fascia to a timber one. So understanding all of those ongoing maintenance requirements. And then the final two is understanding embodied carbon, and that's becoming more and more important in any building work, as is understanding how proposals for transformation sit within the kind of complex and shifting territory of standards and compliance. And I guess a particular one that we've looked at a lot on the project so far is past 2035, as housing providers are increasingly required to work to that.
Okay, so yeah, the catalogue's really aiming to respond to all of these priorities through the Transforming Homes approach. And as an overarching brief, we're trying to prepare a catalogue of scalable and transferable design solutions to improve the performance and the livability of interwar social homes. Okay.
So now we're just going to briefly rattle through some of the key aspects of what the catalogue will contain and show you some work in progress examples of designs. So we've been really working in kind of three key ways. I mean, they all overlap. It's quite hard to categorize work of this kind, but one way that we've been using is there's a set of work which is really exploratory studies to explore the potential of the homes. And then emerging from that, there's a suite of individual components, and then a set of worked examples, if you like, where we look at how you could apply this approach to particular examples of homes. And we're just going to unpack that in a little bit more detail over the next few slides. So the first is this range of exploratory design work, where really we, if you like, take the homes as a blank slate and start to apply different aspects of all of the different design brief, all of the different information we've gathered. So on the left here, you can see some work that we've done looking at the potential of the gardens. So we know that the gardens of these homes are generally quite large because when they were built, it was understood that they were important for growing vegetables and also for outside playing space and so on. So as needs have changed, we're looking at how you could use that in a different way. So looking at sheds and outbuildings to house different elements of technology, and also looking at how you might make landscape strategies work harder to provide both food growing and external amenity space, as well as biodiversity. And then on the right-hand side is a set of studies looking at how you could provide extensions or reconfiguration to the different three house types that we've talked about to provide a kitchen that's big enough to eat in. That's something that comes out again and again and again when we're talking with residents, is that the homes were built with effectively sculleries, which weren't designed to be to have a dining table in, but now the way most people live is a kitchen you can eat in is really important. So that's looking at how a set of reconfigurations or extensions could provide that. And here's an example of some of the range of individual components that have started to emerge from this work. So what we're looking at here is individual design elements that are drawn from that work with residents and housing professionals and the consortium that will achieve different aspects of transformation. So they include components recognizable from traditional retrofit, like fabric insulation and low carbon heating systems, but we're also looking to answer the spatial and beyond retrofit aspects of the brief for these homes. So you can see here, you identified the potential of removing redundant chimney breasts, which are a common feature in homes of this age and type. The need for an additional bathroom. Often the homes only had one, and often residents are finding that as a limitation in their homes, and also a range of extension types to address the particular spatial constraints of this type of home.
So we designed these components to solve the problems residents currently face and to improve their comfort and living environment. However, we also need to understand the wider impacts of each design choice. We therefore assess the components using 6 metrics that are important to different stakeholders. These metrics including upfront and operational energy, upfront and operational cost, and upfront disruption and ongoing maintenance. Upfront carbon costs are particularly relevant to government, local authorities, housing providers, and many other stakeholders, as they're relevant with the national decarbonization targets, funding decisions, and the feasibility of delivering retrofit at scale. Operational energy and cost is especially important to residents because they influence how much energy is needed to maintain a comfortable home and how much the residents need to pay. Finally, installation and disruption, ongoing maintenance matters to both residents and the housing providers as well as professionals, as they influence the housing experiences, long-term management, and the practicality of each solution. So this slide shows how we carry out evaluation regarding each metric. So the upfront energy is based on embodied energy, and the carbon assessment. Operational energy is based on energy modeling using a dynamic building performance simulation tool called Design Builder, and upfront cost is based on quantitative severe cost assessments, and the operational cost is also based on Design Builder modeling and the energy prices, then upfront description and ongoing maintenance are both evaluated by survey-based assessments.
So to demonstrate the transferability of these component solutions and the transforming homes approach more generally, the catalogue will include whole house examples, which apply the component solutions in combination in response to defined scenarios. So I'm not going to unpack each of these in detail now, but we'll look a bit at the modelling approach and then one work in progress example.
This slide shows the design builder baseline model we've developed for the type A, B, and D whole house examples. We are going to compare the building performance of the whole house example against the baseline model to evaluate the impact created by the design components for each whole house example.
So these whole house examples are really aiming to push beyond retrofit as a kind of technical fix and a business as usual focus on like technical building performance. So as well, they're testing the potential of spatial improvements and strategies to improve the livability and the quality of the homes. For example, residents frequently highlighted kitchen and service space as an issue in these homes and the need for additional bedroom space. So we looked at innovative ways to integrate improvements to space and livability alongside improving building performance. So in this example, you can see how a new building skin is being used to improve the usability of the space for a family, including a modest rear extension and a bay window and service voids to future-proof the building for the integration of low-carbon technologies.
Here is an example of how we evaluate the impact of a design component. So firstly, we developed the baseline model and compare its energy use with similar homes of the same size and age in the need data set. This helps us to check that the model reflects a realistic level of household energy use. We then test the impact of adding a design component. So in this case, it's a external wall insulation. This is a bio-based insulation system that replaced the original outer leaf of the covered wall and is finished with a ventilated protective render. So as the results shown on the right, these single design components lead to clear reductions in operational energy use, carbon emission, and energy cost.
So just to wrap up, some of the next things that we're going to be doing on the project. So obviously we're going to be developing these catalogues designs further, including all this modelling and evaluation work that Chenfei has just talked about, and holding workshops with residents to kind of test some of those ideas and make sure we're getting it right. And then also workshops with those wider stakeholders who are going to be the kind of end users of the catalogue to test the content and also to test how we communicate it. If you're interested in getting involved in any of this, obviously please get in touch.
I'm surprised to see that we've actually managed to cover all that in half an hour. So I'm aware that we did rattle through it all fairly quickly, obviously both in terms of covering some of the processes that we've used to gather information about the design and then in terms of the catalogue content. So what would be really great now is we've got to think about half an hour for Q&A. So if you've got questions and would like us to unpack some of that in a little bit more detail, that would be really helpful. And I think if we hand back to Steve, he's gonna chair that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that, Laura, Joel, and Chenfei. Provides a great overview of what has been and is still a huge undertaking to research and develop the start of that catalogue. So yeah, thank you for the very concise presentation there. Yeah, we'll move to questions, as Joel just said. Please could I encourage anyone to add questions in as we go. We have one question that's come in. If that's okay, we'll start with that one from Charlie. Have you had any feedback on how people's homes lead to overheating risks? Charlie says that previous to recent heat waves, I would argue the importance or relevancy of overheating was low, so the timeliness of this research is key. Have we had any feedback on how the homes are overheating?
Yeah, it's actually something I think as we were holding the charrettes with residents last year in winter, that didn't come up very much. And then just yesterday, we were holding a charrette with some other residents in Nottingham, as I mentioned, and overheating came up several times. I think it's really top of people's minds, and some of the solutions that they started adding to those models included solar shading devices and different ways of managing that heat. So it's something that we've definitely had as one of the things one of the points that we're intending to look at, and particularly for one of those worked at samples, I think we really want to look at how we can build resilience to the changing climate into some of this approach. But yeah, it's definitely something that's coming up more and more.
Chenfei, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I think we were going to look at some passive design in particular, especially around different ways of shading as well as different ways of natural ventilation, trying to get that heat out of the house. And one component ensure that we are already using in our demo homes is a better performance window. So this window kind of like it's I guess many people would be familiar with U values, but also with windows, there's another quite important index called solar heat gain coefficient. So the U value controls how much heat you might lose, and then that solar heat gain controls how many heat from the solar. So with these higher performance windows, it usually coming with higher U value but lower solar heat gain. So that allows less solar heat getting into the house. This would obviously like really help with the overheating issues in summertime. And another thing we're going to look at is the future weather scenarios, because we want to have the solution like fit for the current weather, but as well as the future climates, as we all experiencing that climate has quite noticeable change now. So we are going to check the measures we are using now. Would it fit for the future climate? Because there is a quite strong warming trend that we are going to see.
Okay, thanks, Chenfei. There are a couple of follow-up questions related to that. There was a follow-up from Charlie first. Did any in the sessions ask whether air conditioning would be a solution to overheating?
Well, yesterday, as Laura said, it did come up quite a bit. It's timely to run this webinar. It did come up quite a few times yesterday in the charrette we ran in quite hot Nottingham, and there was quite a lot of discussion in the groups I was with around the potential for chimney breasts to accommodate air conditioning units.
Okay, thank you for that. And then Joanne has asked, are we considering the Welsh Quality Housing Standard, and how have the conversations impacted the possible need for legislation guidance to change for tomorrow's world? Again, similar to above, how climate change and the need for cooling as well as heating.
That is obviously, initially at the outset of the project, we looked at that a lot when we were working on the designs for the Swansea demonstration homes, and the WHQS, Welsh Housing Quality Standards, have then gone on. I mean, we did a fairly thorough review of applicable housing standards in England and Wales, and that was one of the key ones that we looked at. So yes, we have.
Brilliant, thanks, Joel. So we'll move on then to Mac and Rao. But thank you, that was brilliant. Could you elaborate more on the bio-based materials used and the build-ups you ended up looking into?
I think something to say for the catalogue is we're really trying to look into quite a broad range of different bio-based materials, including ones that aren't yet market ready. And I think, this piece of work is really hoping to help local authorities and social housing stakeholders in particular increase their uptake of using bio-based materials rather than fossil fuel-based alternatives. So really looking at what is effective in different situations, what the different impacts of different bio-based materials are as well as what is currently market ready. Which is more what is being used in the demonstration homes. We've got things like cork and sheep's wool and wood fibre insulations going into those.
And I guess maybe just another thing to follow on from that, where there's a kind of area of overlap between what's coming out of the demonstration homes, as in stuff that we can implement now, and slightly more ambitious proposals that might be in the catalogue. So one of the things that is really coming up across the project is the issues around problematic cavity fill insulation. So a large number of these homes were built with clear cavities, which have subsequently been filled. And we've developed a whole range of proposals on the demonstration homes, some of which we've taken forward and some of which we've not been able to. So there will be a strand of the catalogue that looks at quite invasive approaches to removing and remediating problematic cavity fill and how you could do that while also looking at making spatial or servicing changes to the homes. And yeah, that's something that we're working on at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Joel. There's a follow-on question from Ellie George. Adding to this query, please could you share your experiences proposing bio-based materials to residents? How have you overcome stakeholders' misconceptions about bio-based materials around fire, performance, and issues with rodents? In addition, as installers, specifiers, and tradespeople have a low skill knowledge base in these materials. Is this covered in the guidance? So there's a sort of two-part there. So maybe in relation to the residents, how have you overcome misconceptions first, maybe?
So something we found quite interesting in talking to residents about bio-based materials, apart from the kind of very basic things around the building physics, how they allow buildings to be more breathable, I think is to talk about how they've been used for a long time in conservation work and working with old buildings, and particularly that they're seen as a very good way to keep really valuable buildings performing well. And that one of the things we're trying to look at in this project is how we can get this sort of housing, which isn't always valued in the same way, to be valued in that way, and to use materials that are really going to extend its life and make it perform the best it can. And I think, yeah, when you can show that these aren't these really kind of novel technologies, that it's not some sort of, strange idea that's been dreamed up, and that they've actually been implemented for years and across the continent, that these are very popular choices, tends to bring people a bit more on board with them, I think.
So the question around installer specifiers and tradespeople and skill level and knowledge base. So that's, across the project, that is obviously something we're very aware of and working on in a number of different ways. So it's something that's being looked at on the demonstration homes and also on a number of pieces of work being done by our colleague Louise King and her colleagues at Bath. So the idea of the that element of the design catalogue will draw on what we've learned from, in particular, those two aspects of work. So the broader kind of stakeholder work that Louise and colleagues are doing, and the learnings that we've got on the demonstration homes, which involves training two very different sets of tradespeople, installers, one working for Swansea Council, one working for a community organisation in Bristol, to use these materials. And the catalogue will contain summaries of what the key learnings have been from all of those in order to inform future transformation.
Yeah, and I think, something that we've talked about is having an element to the catalogue which is around kind of how do you design effectively with bio-based materials, and that we can hopefully bring that through all of the different proposals and solutions in there to kind of show how you most effectively use these, rather than just substituting a bio-based material for a fossil fuel-based material, which we know doesn't quite work in the same way.
Yeah, very good point.
Thank you both. There's one final one there. There was just one acknowledging that it's that they're finding it tricky to use bio-based external wall insulation when building near boundaries due to fire. How are we approaching that? But maybe if you've got a quick answer on that one, maybe that might relate a little bit to some of the demonstration homes.
Yeah, that particular issue has not come up on the demonstration homes in Swansea, or as far as I'm aware in Bristol. I think it's probably something we'd be better placed to unpack via email, if that's all right, if it's something that you'd like to get in touch with us about.
That's probably sensible. Yeah, thanks Joel. Okay, so we'll move on to Orla Kerr. The project includes examples in both Bristol and Swansea. Bearing in mind that residents have highlighted the need for space to improve the function and livability of homes, I wonder, have you considered ways that this project can influence the need for minimum national space standards in Wales in line with the NDSS?
I think the answer is it's not something we thought about in detail at the moment, but it's something we'd be really keen to do. And I know that our colleague Joe Patterson, who's on the call, is working quite closely with various different people in Welsh Government on housing policy. So I guess that the hope would be that the work that is coming out of this project would start to inform those discussions.
I would just add that we are aware of the implication, but it's probably more from the transformation perspective, in the sense that while we are aware of national space standards in Wales and what we need to do for new builds, this project is obviously looking at it in a respect of how houses that were designed 100 years ago now need to be upscaled. And so there probably is an aspect of how, you know, the work that we're doing could inform a transformation approach to national space standards in Wales. But it isn't something we're directly working on at the moment.
I think something really interesting that we have come across a lot in our work with the residents in particular is actually around, with this housing type, knowing that all of these homes designed as kind of 3-bedroomed homes, and they're all very regular in terms of the kind of overall square footage of them. They're often allocated in social housing to kind of larger families, and we know that that can often cause issues with space. But there's also a piece of work looking at how can a variety of different people live in these homes, because we've come across a lot of households that are smaller, 2-people households who actually find the space perfectly sufficient. And I think there's a piece of work around looking at who do these homes suit now, and how can we adapt them to accommodate a wider range of different households. And there is a bit of exploratory work that we've done on that so far, but it's actually a really interesting thing. And it's also interesting about kind of looking at the life cycle of homes and the life cycle of households, which change in size over time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Laura. So 2 questions from Nathan Cousins. So I'll start with the first one. This one relates more to, I suppose, the design aspects that we're considering as part of the catalogue. How are you accommodating for the key infrastructure challenges in the brief, i.e. space to house air source heat pump, capacity of the grid to take the energy production load? Is it part of the thought process?
So is it part of the thought process? Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of the work that we've done looks at, I guess in some ways, yeah, one of the things we've looked at a lot is ways to mitigate the taking up of internal space by new technologies. So we talked about, a few slides ago in the presentation about the potential of gardens. So we've done quite a bit of work to look at that. And again, we've faced challenges and opportunities on air source heat pumps on the Swansea demonstration home. So all of that thinking is feeding in to the work on the catalogue, looking at how you can house technologies both fully externally in gardens and in kind of attached external space around the homes. In terms of grid capacity, obviously it's part of the thought process. I think in general, the focus of the work on the catalogue is individual homes and how they would be transformed. There will be a piece and a context piece in the catalogue that touches on these broader kind of infrastructural challenges. And yeah, it's part of the thought process, but we're not making proposals for changes to the national grid.
We are aware, as part of the work, I think Joel was just touching on it, that the working on just one house or a pair of houses or a short terrace of houses is situated in amongst a larger estate as well. So some of the things that we're considering as maybe follow-on research or other aspects of some of the other packages of work we're doing is looking at some of the deliverability models and what that might mean for knock-on effects for more infrastructural aspects, but as Joel said, they're not specifically part of the catalogue looking at the specific responses to houses at the moment. The other question, you touched on this a little about the gardens, Joel, from Nathan. Do you have any thoughts on the apparent change of focus leading to a tech-led approach in the short term? Oh, I thought I said tech shed, sorry, so it doesn't relate to the garden. So apologies about that one. Leading to a tech-led approach in the short term over fabric investment.
I suppose, does this sort of refer to something that we've seen quite a lot when, particularly on large scale retrofit schemes, where stockholders tend to go for technology solutions rather than fabric first solutions. And I think a lot of our work with those kind of stakeholders has shown that partly that is around disruption. And I think disruption to residents is something that's really forefront in everybody's mind working in that sector, and that tech-led solutions can often be applied quite quickly and quite discreetly, in a way that some of those fabric first interventions require a lot more disruption to residents. And I think, yeah, obviously there's kind of all different arguments for one approach over another, but I think, yeah, some of the work we're hoping to do is trying to see, you know, how those can be balanced and how they can be integrated together, and what, you know, how different priorities of all these different stakeholders can come into play to create something that's actually realistic as well. Yeah, we've experienced with the demonstration homes, I think that a lot of changes to the scope due to the reality of people's lives living in those homes and the amount of disruption that people in different situations can actually take on. And so you can see why there is this tech-led approach quite commonly, even though it's not necessarily what I think we'd want to promote as a project.
I think maybe the question is also picking up a bit on kind of funding and policy potential changes. I think just two really quick things to say about that. One is, you know, as I think we've kind of described through the presentation, the role of the catalogue, where it sits amongst quite a wide range of outputs from this project, is kind of necessarily and deliberately an aspirational document. And we know that we can't make these homes better spaces and places to live for the next 10, 20, 50, 100 years without addressing some of the spatial and fabric based issues that they have. So I think we would all make the argument that you have to look at it as a whole, and that we would all hope in this kind of aspirational document that we're making that funding and policy may well change in the future to accommodate some of that. And I think particularly with the change of Prime Minister coming up this week and the discussion of council house building, we don't know what that might mean for, you know, immediate changes to policy around retrofitting. So we will keep going at bearing all of those in mind and looking at spatial and fabric improvements as well as technology.
Thank you for that. So moving on to a question from Paul Drury. This may be one that we may need to pick up via email, but I'll ask it in case you or Chenfei, any of you have got a response to it. So yeah, from Paul Drury, the PAS 2035 process is essential for social housing landlords delivering retrofit of housing under government grant funding schemes, with all measures needing to have trust mark lodgement. We have had issues in previous schemes, such as SHDF with architect design solutions, where the designed insulation solution did not have PAS 2030 compliance. How will this be addressed within the design catalogue?
So it's a really good question. And the best person on the project to speak to about that, I think, is Emma Taylor at Bath, who with Chenfei and I presented the webinar a couple of weeks ago about the demonstration homes. And in the demonstration homes in Bristol, they've faced and met a number of challenges around PAS compliance. And I think it would be much more instructive to have a conversation with her. So if you get in touch via the project email address, and I think just in terms of the catalogue, all of this stuff will feed into the catalogue, and we're still figuring out exactly how we'll frame it. But we will make sure that all of these required compliances and so on are mentioned, and the context is set out in the introductory aspects of the catalogue.
Okay, I hope that's okay, Paul. We'll if you can reach out to us, or we can maybe respond through Emmett on that one. Okay, we have some other questions. I just wondered whether whether it's worth expanding on some of the aspects of the design process from the charrettes, and how some of the knowledge. It's very difficult, obviously, holding a charrette and picking up all the different diverse experiences from residents, in how some of that knowledge and information that we're gaining has led to some informing some of the design of the components and the worked examples that you were mentioning earlier. Maybe a little bit of expansion on some of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. It's really interesting because so much of what we learn from residents and from other stakeholders is this very qualitative information, and sometimes that's really hard to kind of categorize and pin down, and I think language in particular is something that everybody uses very differently. I think one of the really rich things in it has been that we as a design team have also been the ones there in the room in all of those engagement activities, and that you learn so much, not only from these kind of model making tasks and working together with people, kind of understanding their homes and understanding their ideas for them, but yeah, just those conversations and being able to kind of draw all that together in the work that we're doing has been really valuable, I think. We are, of course, finding ways to kind of analyze and record everything that's learned in those. And as we've been developing the resources for those engagement activities, we've been kind of honing some of the ways that we can capture that information in a way that makes it a little bit easier to digest and analyze afterwards. And we're working with an assistant on the project, Matt, who's been doing loads of work around kind of recording and analysing all the information that we've gathered from all of these processes, and keep reflecting back on those as we do some of the more studio-based development work on the catalogue.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Laura. Manos has just asked, maybe this one is, I mean, this is something that's in progress, but maybe Chenfei might want to respond to it. But will indicative data shared be transferable across the UK? Or maybe what's our approach to how we're approaching, obviously, a very diverse housing stock in very different parts of the UK, different orientations and so on. But yeah, is there any insight in how indicative data shared will be transferable across the UK?
Well, I guess one example is that there are a lot of charrettes that our colleagues carried out, and we kind of share the information on how we gather the information we need for the design and how to carry out the design with different stakeholders. So I think in this process, all the events we've been to, so we kind of shared the way we do it across the whole UK, because we've been to quite a lot of places. And then in terms of other side, such as the well, maybe more about the metrics side that we use to measure how good this design content is. So we have very clear strategy about how we set up the model, how we compare the model, and how we measure it. So I guess we will have this in documented. So I guess when we publish this, everyone could see, and maybe would could influence them.
And I suppose it's always a difficult thing when looking at a whole housing archetype, which we know obviously there are 1.4 million of these homes all across England and Wales, and being able to show indicative values at a level that are really useful to the people who are trying to make decisions about these homes, but also not going into so much detail on these things that it becomes overwhelming. And I think one of the things with the catalogue being sort of industry facing and trying to give values, like ranges of values and comparative values that actually help people to make decisions, and then that being backed up by a lot more detailed evidence that's referred to from the catalogue. I don't know if I've phrased that very well, but there's parts of this project that are going into a lot of detail on the kind of modelling strategies, and we know that trying to fit all of that into this kind of piece of design guidance is going to make it not particularly digestible to a broader audience. So finding ways that we can communicate what we've learned, and that can be evidenced by other more academic documents, I think is a balance that we're trying to find at the moment.
Okay, we have 2 minutes to go, so maybe it's best to wrap up at this point. And see, there was a question in the chat about how to contact us if there's follow-up questions. I know that obviously, yeah, thank you for the slide change. And Veronica has also put into the chat some of the links to the LinkedIn, our website and our newsletter and so on. So that's obviously how you can contact us if you would like to stay in touch or find out more about the project, ask us questions and so on. Sorry, was Laura, Joel, was someone going to say something? I just cut you off.
No.
No, okay, sorry. I thought I heard someone say. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining. I don't think, let me just make sure that we haven't missed a question with only a minute to go. No, I don't think we have. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Hopefully it's been insightful. And yeah, please follow us and stay in touch and share any thoughts that you might have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.